The Camry and the RAV4 are not direct competitors, but their similar price, passenger space, and powertrains help make them some of the most popular vehicles on the road. So today I'm going to move past the generalizations to give you all of the differences between the two to help you decide which one is better. Briefly, if you enjoy fun, detailed car content without fluff, consider subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. First, the Camry next to me is a 2023, while this is a 2022. The 23 RAV4 should be arriving soon, with changes that include Toyota Safety Sense 2.5, the new Toyota infotainment system, a standard 7-inch driver display with a full digital cluster available, and a sweet-looking woodland hybrid trim that should provide an even more forgiving ride. But if you assume it to be capable on a trail, then your expectations will likely be more shattered than the pelvis of the average street takeover pedestrian. When it comes to price, the Camry is going to undercut the RAV4, but that margin grows in hybrid form due to the RAV4 Hybrid's standard all-wheel drive. Also, if you're looking for individual reviews on the Camry and RAV4, I'll link them below. Under the hood of the Camry and the RAV4, you're going to have Toyota's 2.5-liter direct injected, port fuel injected inline 4. Here in the Camry, that's going to make between 202 and 206 horsepower. This is all going to be hooked up to an 8-speed automatic. This transmission is also in the gas-only RAV4. From my recent review of a standard Camry, I found the 8-speed to be a touch too hesitant to downshift, though it did feel linear and smooth. Here's what that powertrain did to 60 a couple months ago. Very little drama off the line. 8-speed has some pretty good aggressive ratios. That was pretty smooth, adequate thrust. 60 came up in 8 seconds. Admittedly, we started to go a little bit more downhill at the end there. Due to sleek aero and 8 gears, the 2.5-liter alone does not feel labored at highway passing. It also revs around just 1,500 RPMs at 65 miles per hour, allowing it to get up to 39 miles per gallon, easily outpacing a front-wheel drive RAV4. Here today I am in the hybrid, and here it's going to make a little bit less than the RAV4 at 208 horsepower. And when you combine it with the hybrid powertrain versus the gas engine, you get more response. Like I mentioned in my most recent hybrid review, when you start to factor in, the $2,000 or $2,500 upgrade cost to go with the hybrid, it actually takes you around 60,000 miles to make up the fuel difference. And if you keep it 12 or 15 years, or you're buying one secondhand, you have to replace the battery. The overall cost savings here isn't as crazy as you would think, despite it getting, like 15, sometimes 20 miles to the gallon better than the standard car. If you consider those things, I think the biggest pro is just how much more reactive the hybrid is when compared to the standard engine. And you have Toyota's eCVT. Its ability to get the transmission right to the correct ratio almost immediately helps it feel potent. It's a quick little car. Additionally, the electric torque assists in a more dialed-in response. It provides a seamless but less natural feeling acceleration compared to the standard engine, but let's see what the numbers say from 0 to 60. Oh, that's definitely quicker than the standard car. 60. Off the line, you can tell it still kind of limits it there a little bit. There's no wheel slip whatsoever. At 7.2 seconds to 60, it's quicker than the standard car. But again, the main thing that you're going to appreciate with this engine outside of the fuel economy is the more refined, quicker response. Even though really the power to weight ratio should technically be a little bit worse. And the RAV4 benefits in the same way. Now in the RAV4, we'll have the same basic power plants with slightly different outputs. We're looking at 203 horsepower, but if we go with the hybrid, now we'll have 219 with one major mechanical difference. So the regular Camry hybrid, again, has one drive motor and then another motor built into the transmission. This still has both of those, but adds a motor at the back to act as the all-wheel drive system. So there's no actual drive line connecting the two, and going with the standard engine still isn't too bad. It's gonna feel noticeably slower in day-to-day driving, but again, if you get the hybrid, that's basically all alleviated. Partially thanks to the hybrid's eCVT. It's going to come on most Toyota hybrids. It uses that second motor that would help replenish battery charge and regen, and spools up the transmission with it. So a normal CVT is going to use a chain and cones and whatnot to change the ratio on the fly to get you into the most efficient RPM range, whether that be for acceleration or gas mileage. Here, with the motor, it allows it to respond much quicker, get to that point faster. Yes, it does still hold revs and sounds like a CVT, because it is, but the performance is great. Let me show you what this thing did from 0 to 60 a few months ago. Oh, there's an adventure. You know, that was actually pretty good. Right off the line, there's plenty of torque, and it just held constant. 6.9 seconds is actually what I got for the old V6 model. This thing can really book it if it needs to. You may be wondering why the hybrid RAV4 was a little bit quicker to 60 than the Camry hybrid, and a lot of you probably don't care, but actually you should. Because due to the extra electric motor, my theory is that since that doesn't have to, go through a transmission, it's able to provide more oomph right off the line. Something that you kind of do notice if you try to step on it in the Camry hybrid. This has just a little bit better response there at the low end. Once you get moving, I mean, either of them are great. In fact, I would say that the Camry still feels a little bit better, but that's one thing that I do feel different between the two. Another thing is highway noise. There's definitely more wind noise in this thing than with the Camry, so do take that into account. Although it's still not going to be as loud as a lot of other competitors, I wouldn't consider the RAV4 a noisy car. I'd like to thank Royal South Toyota in Bloomington, Indiana for letting me test drive the Camrys and RAV4s you see in this video today. Royal South has a friendly staff and is deeply devoted to the community. If you're in the market, check them out. One leg up that the RAV4 can't brag about in the powertrain department is the available V6 of the Camry. It's quite a rare option these days, and it definitely sacrifices the gas mileage, but it adds some serious punch. We're talking 300 horsepower in a Toyota Camry. They even offer a TRD version that lowers the ride height, adds chassis bracing and aero to make for a surprisingly capable Camry that could have been epic with a manual transmission or limited slip differential. Due to low demand of that 3.5 liter, you cannot get all-wheel drive with the V6. Although if you want something that's actually a little bit quicker to 60, you can go with the RAV4 Prime if you have detective skills Sherlock Holmes could only dream for, as they are extremely hard to find. That will also be a plug-in hybrid with a respectable in-town range, but I have never driven either the TRD or the RAV4 Prime, so I won't really talk too much about those in this video. Both cars will get LED headlights as standard, with the option to get swankier accent lighting, but the Camry is going to have Toyota's smart proximity key standard on more models than the RAV4, which is, in my opinion, one of the most helpful convenience features. So the Camry is going to have 5.7 inches of ground clearance, and the RAV4 is going to have about 2.5 to 3 inches of ground clearance more, depending on your trim. That said, neither of these are off-road kings. Really, the second motor there is to prevent wheel spin with harder acceleration on more loose surfaces and to help in all-weather scenarios, but the rear axle motor sadly lacks the power and traction necessary to make it capable in more tricky scenarios, according to a test done by TFL I will link below, though this is an improvement over the previous RAV4 hybrid. The regular RAVs come with front-wheel drive standard in most trims. In non-TRD or adventure specs, the optional all-wheel drive is the same setup in the Camry, which is primarily front-wheel drive, but if it senses that you're going to need to send power to the back or the front wheels slip, it will divert up to 50% of torque to the rear. On the RAV4, it comes with dedicated off-road modes that try to use the brakes to divert power to the wheels with traction. And then if you want something that's a little bit more capable, you can go to the Adventure or TRD off-road, and that's going to give you torque vectoring on the rear. Yes, you do have like trail modes that will use the brakes to try to torque vector, but this is actually like through the differential. And while that should inspire more confidence, especially on icy roads, I'm really still not going to recommend a RAV4 to someone who like plans on taking these things more off-road. At that point, if you're not just getting a 4Runner or Wrangler, I would steer you more towards the Subaru Outback or Forester Wilderness. Not too long ago, all-wheel drive was also introduced for the Toyota Camry. That is available on the gas-only models. Hybrids, unfortunately, don't get that. It's not the torque vectoring system that you'll get with some of the higher trim RAV4s. They just wanted to give you something that will basically give you confidence that if you park your car and you come out and there's 5 inches of snow on the ground, you can still get home or wherever you need to be. However, it does come at a cost, and that is gas mileage. So the standard car is going to get, upper 30s, 38 miles to the gallon. The hybrid can get actually 52 miles to the gallon with the, skinnier tire setup of the LE. However, if you get the all-wheel drive model, you're talking 34 on the highway. That is right there with an all-wheel drive RAV4. So that takes away from one big pro to getting the Camry over the RAV4, with the RAV4 having a lot more space. But still, it's not that cut and dry. The approaches to the interior of the Camry and the RAV4 are vastly different. On the Camry side, things are a little bit more plush. Around the cabin, the material finishes don't feel like they would stand up to the same level of dirt and abuse as the RAV4s. Well, both of them are majority plastic. Some nice soft touch for where your elbows rest, and the dashboards aren't too cheap feeling. But the RAV4 also adds a lot of rubberized materials, whether it's on the front door handles or the big chunky knobs that I love. It exudes a more outdoorsy personality that I think might stand up better to family abuse than the Camry, although they both have a solid feel. Where they diverge more is in the driving position. So the Camry, you're going to sit lower, your legs are going to extend out further, and you have longer seat bottoms, which makes for a more comfortable seat. It's better for both taller and shorter drivers, although do note your headroom is going to be a little bit more compromised. I'm 6'3", I can fit in the front, I can fit in the back, but the RAV4 will have an edge in headroom the same way that the Camry takes a slight lead in legroom. You're going to have a more open and airy vibe with the RAV4. However, when it actually comes to knee room and width, the Camry might actually have the edge. I always thought it was the RAV4 that did, but I think the openness of the cabin can kind of be misleading. Yeah, I might have a little bit more hip room, but due to the door card and kind of more protruding plastics, my knees rest on those more than they do in the Camry. So comfort all around, front and rear, goes to the Camry. It's not to say that this is bad. You're gonna have shorter seat bottoms that sit higher up. It allows for better visibility. I just wouldn't consider it as good for long distance travel. When it comes to tech, the RAV4 wins. For 23, it will have that new infotainment system with 8 or 10.3 inch screens, wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and the previously optional 7-inch cluster display is now standard with an available all-digital setup. The Camry's system has an unimpressive resolution and response time, but a more traditional interface than the new unit. The Camry also has the heads-up display available in more outfits than the RAV4. Notably, you have less USB ports in here. You don't get any in the back of the Camry whatsoever, unless you specifically accessorize them. You also get rear seat vents on every single RAV4, which is a huge pro for a lot of people. Whereas the Camry, you have to step up to the XLE. While both can get heated and ventilated front seats, the RAV4 is the only one to get heated rear seats. It seems like the RAV4 is surprisingly more family focused than the family sedan. There's just a little bit better cubbies on the RAV4, and then obviously a much bigger cargo area. So the Camry still has a respectable amount of space. There's not really a whole lot of insulation back there. It's nice and wide, reasonably tall. You can fold down the rear seats and you get a decent little pass through there. There is a spare tire on every single Camry as well. Both of these will work good for road trips, but this is just going to have so much more versatility on top of it. And this is something that you would expect if you're going with an SUV, but this is great even compared to most other compact CUVs. While both of these are based on Toyota's TNGA-K platform, the Camry is about a foot longer than the RAV4. They're about the same width, but the Camry also has a 6-inch longer wheelbase, which does make a difference, not only on the interior, but also on the road. Before I whip these on various roads, we need to keep in mind that the SE and XSE of the Camry and RAV4 each offer a sport-tuned suspension. There's also the TRD-tuned suspensions on select cars. I have both of the main setups for the Camry, but let's try out the sport suspension in the SE first. It's not a BMW when it comes to the suspension suppleness and poise, but I can drive over here confidently, and its capability makes it almost fun. Steering still isn't sports sedan quick. It also doesn't really offer any feedback, but the well-weighted, relatively precise steering and low center of gravity all help this feel like a more lively, less cumbersome car on a back road than the RAV4. But I think the overall feeling here is just a little bit less connected to the road than the Camry, which I think is mainly because of the extra body motion from this thing. Your inputs have a slightly longer reaction time, and as a result, through corners it feels a little bit less direct. The SE RAV4 I drove before offered a marginally more buttoned-down cornering experience, but neither can match the smooth Camry. In the RAV4, you should theoretically have a little bit more suspension travel, and that should make it more comfortable. And you know what? It is comfortable, and it is supple. It takes abuse, and you can do this in either the sport suspension or the standard suspension. But for a majority of roads, it's not really any more posh than the Camry until you throw it at the most broken of pavement. That's when you start to notice the difference. But through just about everything else, the Camry comes off less choppy. Here on some really neglected Indiana back roads, the Camry LE in particular is very smooth. I'm going over bumps that, a lot of small SUVs are more disturbed by than this. And even if you hit these imperfections mid-corner, the car still feels glued to the road. Now in my SE, I will have the sport-tuned suspension, and the result is a car that is a little bit more playful and firmer. It's not as smooth, just by like the slightest detectable amount, than the standard suspension setup in XLE, LE, whatnot. But by no means does that mean this is uncomfortable. I think for most people you could interchange whichever one. It just depends on your preference, whether or not you want a firmer or softer suspension. This is not going to oust itself if you live near some more beat up roads. In summary, the Camry is the more comfortable car in most scenarios. It's also more quiet, with a slight edge in cabin luxury. It has a big leg up in efficiency for the most part, and don't forget, it also has better passenger support and legroom. The RAV4 earns merit for its more robust suspension that helps you through bad potholes. It also has an interior and feature set that seems better suited for families. It's also better equipped to tow, hauling up to 3,500 pounds with the Adventure or TRD off-road's additional cooling. Its increased ground clearance and visibility makes it easier to drive more places than the Camry as well. For now, it also holds an advantage in tech. Both of these are very agreeable cars that don't exactly have an authentic character. Their success lies in their ability to fulfill the needs of a wide variety of people in a reliable manner with low running costs and a bit of flair. While I think the RAV4 deserves the sales crown as it is the car better suited for family duties, the Camry surprised me once again. It holds a serious advantage over the RAV with its more upscale on-road demeanor and better handling. For that reason, unless I regularly move bulky items, constantly have kids in and out of the thing, or want a ride that could take me up Forest Service roads, I'd stick with the Camry. So now, let me know which one you would rather pick up. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then leave a like to help me stick it to the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and hit the bell for more. And thank you to my loyal patrons for your continuing support. I'll catch you in the next one.